welcome you to our first free invasive plant workshop of this week. And this is Invasive Plants in Autumn, Introduction and Identification. My name is Rowena Zimmerman, and I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach with Blue Ridge PRISM. And we're so happy to have you here with us today. Really quick, before we get into the meat of the program, I really hope you can hear me. If you have any audio issues, I've got some things on this slide to help you, try to troubleshoot. And if worse comes to worse, we also have closed captioning enabled. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you might have to hit the three dots on the right-hand side where it says more. There's a CC symbol. If you click on that, the closed captioning turns on, and then you'll see everything that's being spoken typed out on the bottom. Zoom tips, like I asked you before when you were joining us, to write to us in the chat where you're from. The chat function is really for you to share information with us or with the audience about about yourself or where you're joining us from, or like different resources you'd like to share with everyone. We asked if you have any questions for the panelists or for our staff, to please put it in the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A, and we'll be able to better serve you there, answer you, and know that you have questions. So again, general information in the chat, questions for us in the Q&A. Really quick, we've got a lot going on in the fall, as I'm sure many of you do too. But I just want to make sure you're aware of Blue Ridge PRISM's kind of the companion piece to this one is tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And that is our invasive plant online workshop featuring management and control of invasive plants. So it goes hand in hand with the identification part. It is also free. And again, if you can't join us live, sign up anyway. We will send you the link to the recording. So that is tomorrow, and we hope you can join us there. I know Tim has a lot of great stuff and information planned for you. On the next day is our in-person workshop. So if you would like us to be there with you in person to kind of show you in real time what things look like and how to control them, we will be meeting you all at McIntyre Park in Charlottesville, where we'll take a plant identification walk and also teach you the different ways to control things. And you can have like more of a hands-on in real-time experience where you can actually see how to do certain things and what things actually look like in nature on the ground. And highly recommend, if you're near us or not near us and you want to drive in, that you join us. It's a really, really valuable learning opportunity. And then next week, we've got our fall quarterly meeting coming up on October 15th. And as a reminder to all, our quarterly meetings are always free. They're online and they're open to all. And we hope that you can join us for the topic this year, which is reintroducing prescribed fire. We're really excited to have three great panelists with us: Adam Coates, Jean Lorbert, and Paula Wyman, and they will talk about the different aspects of controlled burns and what their experience and where their expertise is in each of those. This is also a free webinar, as I mentioned before, and we hope you'll join us. It should be really, really interesting. And again, if you want to look at these events, and I didn't go through every single one we've got coming up because it is a busy time of year, please look on our website, blueridgeprism.org/events, and all of them are listed there and also linked to register. Finally, before I turn it over to Jacob and Natalie, we are going to try really hard to answer all of your questions. But sometimes we won't be able to if like we run out of time. Hopefully we won't, but if there's a situation where we run out of time or we don't get to your question, we want to be able to answer them. So please go ahead and contact us at info@blueridgeprism.org, and we'd be happy to help you. Okay, to our main event. I'm so happy to be joined by two PRISM staff, Natalie Walker and Jacob Edel. They are our invasive management specialists at Blue Ridge PRISM. Natalie serves our northern region of our 12 county region, and Jacob serves the southern part of our 12 county region. We also have Lauren Taylor, who's our executive director, and Tim Maywald, who are here as panelists and will be helping to answer the questions in the Q&A. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing and let Natalie get us started.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So welcome to Blue Ridge PRISM's Fall Identification Online Workshop. So who is Blue Ridge PRISM? PRISM is the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, and we're the first cooperative weed management area in Virginia. Where is Blue Ridge PRISM and what counties do we cover? So we cover 12 counties, as you can see to the right on the map in the teal color, 3.6 million acres, including 200,000 acres in Shenandoah National Park. And Blue Ridge PRISM, our core purpose is to improve the health of our natural world for future generations. So today's presentation will be covering invasive plants that are easy to identify and treat in the fall. And first, we're going to look at an aquatic habit where two-horned trappa can be found. So two-horned trappa is an early detection rapid response species, also known as EDRR. So with those EDRR species, you're identifying and controlling new or emerging invasive plants and preventing them from becoming widespread infestations. So in addition to being an early detection rapid response species, two-horned trappa is also considered a 5-alarm fire species. And these are species that take priority no matter the size of the infestation due to how fast they spread and the magnitude of the threat that they pose. So just some identified characteristics of two-horned trappa. We'll start with the green leaves. It's diamond shaped. The edges of the leaves are serrated. If you look under the leaf, you'll see a maroonish color. It kind of looks like it's inflated, and that helps the plant stay buoyant and it allows it to float. So the tops of the leaves are green, but if you flip the plant over, the underside of the leaves are a reddish maroon color. Two-horned trappa can form very dense mats on shallow, slow-moving freshwater ponds. So if you live on a farm or have a pond on your property, this is one to definitely keep an eye out for. And those dense mats prevent sunlight from reaching native aquatic plants underneath. And they also inhibit recreational activities. So it would be difficult to boat or fish or swim in a pond that is covered with trappa. So if you look at the bottom middle photo, that is a black seed pod from two-horned trappa. It has two opposing horns. And the way it spreads so widely is that those seed pods get stuck on migratory birds like Canada geese, for example, and then those birds are flying to different ponds, and then those seeds are dropping off and spreading it widely. The next habit is grasses. So this is Chinese silvergrass. Many of you have probably seen this as it's a really popular landscaping plant. It's a clumping grass that can grow 8 to 10 feet tall, and its seeds are carried by the wind and they spread via tire treads. It is a popular landscaping plant due to its showy feathery flowers. And it's still commonly used in commercial and residential landscaping plantings, but it is spreading along roadsides. Chinese silvergrass is a fire hazard because of its dry clumps of dead stalks and leaves. Fountain grass is another invasive grass. This is also considered an early detection rapid response species or an EDRR species. It is a clumping grass that grows to about 3 feet tall. If it doesn't have those spiky bottle brush flower heads, it's pretty nondescript. And as you can see in this photo, those really dense bottle brush spikes make it very distinctive and help identify the plant. And they're also a dark purple color. Fountain grass is now spreading on roadsides, and it's definitely a problem for farmers with pastures as livestock don't eat it, and it will displace native pastures. So in the top left photo, this is a picture of a fountain grass leaf. It's pretty nondescript. And then the photo on the bottom left, it was taken in a ditch by the side of the road where it was mowed for suppression, but it came back and bloomed lower to the ground. And then the middle photo is just a more close-up of the bottle brush. And then the right photos with the leaves and the purple bottle brushes. Oops. The next grass is Ravenna grass. This is still sold at garden centers. It's a clumping grass that goes really, really tall. It can get about 12 feet tall. And much like invasive pampas grass, or similar to pampas grass, but Ravenna grass can grow and survive in our colder winters. So in the top left photo, this is just showing the long leaf with a white center down the middle. And then the bottom left photo, the Ravenna grass has a very hairy ligule. And you can see the bottom middle photo that Ravenna grass has a really long, feathery flower. So this is a side-by-side photo of native Indian grass and then invasive Ravenna grass on the right. The native Indian grass, it doesn't get as tall as the invasive Ravenna grass. It grows about, I think, 6 to 8 feet tall. The flowers are not as showy and feathery, and they're the flowers are an orange gold color. But the invasive Ravenna grass gets really tall and it has those kind of silvery, beigeish, feathery flowers. The next habit is shrubs. So this is Amur honeysuckle. This picture is showing the whole shrub and showing the scale and how large it can get. It is still widely planted in the landscape. But you can just see it's just displacing native plants in that forested area. This is a close-up of the leaves and fruit of Amur honeysuckle. So the fruit right now is red. It comes in pairs, and then the leaf shape, it's wider towards the stem, and then it gets skinnier and kind of tapers to a point away from the stem. The bark of more mature Amur honeysuckle is stripy and kind of ridged. And if you cut into an Amur honeysuckle into the bark, the inside is hollow. Something else that's interesting about amber honeysuckle is it's allelopathic. So what that means is it releases chemicals from its roots that inhibit native plants from growing nearby. The next invasive shrub is autumn olive. This is another picture of the whole shrub or what it looks like in the landscape and how tall it can get. It's about 16 feet tall. So autumn olive produces copious amounts of fruit this time of year, and birds will eat the fruit, but it's very sugary and it doesn't provide the fat content needed to make their migration. So those clusters of fruit are growing all along the stem. And you'll notice with those clusters of red fruit that it's either silvery or rust-colored speckling that happens on the fruits. And then there's an even closer picture. So in addition to being a prolific seeder, they'll invade forests and prevent trees from regenerating or generating. Something else about autumn olive is the stems can get 4 to 6 inches in diameter, so they can get really massive. And this is what the autumn olive leaf underside looks like. It's whitish or silvery in color. Border privet is another invasive shrub. This is showing what the shrubs look like in the landscape and how large they can get, about 20 feet tall. And border privet is still widely planted in the landscape. So border privet, it has opposite leaves along the stem. They are dark green, kind of leathery, and the leaf edges are smooth and they're not serrated. This is what border privet fruit is starting to look like now. It's like a dark bluish purpley black color, and it is spread by birds. And this is what Chinese privet looks like in the landscape. So Chinese privet and border privet do look very similar. They're often inherited or planted in the landscape. But you can see Chinese privet also has opposite leaves along the stem. The leaves are dark green, kind of leathery in appearance. And Chinese privet also has smooth edges, and there's no, it's not serrated on the leaf edges. And that is what the fruit is starting to look like now for the Chinese privet, which again is spread by birds. And there's no native privets in North America, so it's best to just remove them from the landscape. And now I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn it over to Jacob.
Thank you, Natalie. And I'll be taking a right off from where she left with a Japanese barberry here we see depicted in someone's landscaping with its iconic burgundy to purple color. Here we have a bit of a close-up on those leaves as well as fruit. That cultivated color is primarily why we have this planted, as well as hang on to those red berries right about now. We have a love for the color red in our landscaping. However, though, once it escapes, it goes back to its wild type color, Very regular green color, so it can be a little bit easy to miss once it starts to run away. Here we have another close-up of those leaves, now wild type green, very spoon or water drop shaped. And here we have a bit of a close-up and highlight of another one of its characteristics. Japanese barberry has some very needle-like wicked thorns on it. I liken to call it in person, I call it ouch bush. And I'll reach my hand in there because just a very small glance, they will absolutely stab you, and they can be fairly little painful things. Now, this bush can also grow quite dense, and fortunately, it forms a nice little habitat for the black-legged tick, the ones that go around carrying Lyme disease. So on top of its already problematic invasive habits, it is a harbor for an even worse pest. And here's another look. We see some of those thorns again, as well as a very indicative yellow bark, which even extends into the roots if you do happen to cut or pull this plant up. Next plant here is jet bead, depicted, this one depicted back in the spring. As I mentioned early in the spring, it has two very easily identifiable features. This one, the flower, this four-petaled white flower. So you would have seen this back in approximately May. And it's always in this unique four-petal pattern. Additionally, throughout most of the year into the fall, we'll have these very deep, wrinkled or waffly leaves, as seen here, very strong creasing in them. And you see depicted below is its namesake, these jet black bead-like seeds coming in sets of 3 or 4. Here we see a pot 4. And over here we see 3, that very dark, inky black, how it got its name. And much like the seeds mentioned before for the honeysuckles, these just don't really have the nutritive, pardon, the nutritive balance that birds need when they happen to be in fruit. The next plant here is linden arrowwood, another great example of a heavily fruiting invasive plant. You can just see the scale of these suckers. That's probably, over 12 feet tall, planted along some trailway or roadway. A prolific cedar, these large red berry clusters are the easiest way to spot it out in the wild right now. And they are, again, another too sugary or low nutrition for what, fats and carbs the birds really need at this time of year. Great way to check it when you can't see the berries or perhaps they're too high. For soft confirmation is these raised veins at the bottom of the leaf. However, the best confirmation is still those fruit. And back to those fruit we see here, there is a native look-like with the southern arrowwood. It has very dark bluish purple berries and very scattered little clusters versus the linden arrowwood's very dense, tightly packed red fruit, pictured on the right. Next plant here depicted is Nandina. This is one of the newer plants added to the DCR list, the Department of Conservation and Recreation's official invasive plant list for Virginia. And this depiction here we see where most of us will see it typically in people's landscaping. Now, this plant does have a variety of colorations as it's going through the season, from its deep greens to yellows and reds, very dramatic coloring, as well as its own clusters of berries that it's holding on to right now. A little close up, they are unfortunately also rather prolific cedars, and you'll see interspersed just tight, grouped clusters of seeds throughout the plant. Now, these berries are also unfortunately toxic, most notably to our native cedar waxwing bird. So, as all the other plants we've mentioned so far are just kind of like junk food at certain critical times of year, this one is actively toxic. Here we have another focus on these leaves starting to churn between green foliage to a bit more fall coloration. And we see here this repeating excuse me, repeating opposite pattern up and down of compound leaves. Now, in most of our photos, we saw it as it was planted in the landscape, very dense and close together for a nice shrub. When it tends to run away, it actually returns back to a more leggy, lengthy, and thin and low form depicted here. So this is nowhere near as tall as where we saw it earlier, and certainly nowhere near as dense. So there's a good chance when the plant is running away, we might have overlooked it because it's growing in a very different habit. Next plant here is winged euonymus, also known as burning bush. This plant has unfortunately become a bit of an unofficial landscaper for the city of Charlottesville, if any of you are near there. I'm sure most of you have seen this dramatic red coloration it's turning right now all throughout the city. Here's another close-up of just how dramatic and solid that red coloration can be, as opposed to the kind of interspersed in the Andina in the last set of photos. This one will turn to a solid burning colored bush. However, looking at its name, winged, this is where it gets that namesake from. So the stems and branches of this plant will be covered in elongated corky stems, sticking out almost to half an inch from the bark, going laterally up and down, seen here in the circle. Now, these aren't particularly strong, so they do have a habit of breaking off or rubbing from, say, the wind or deer rub. So, in a lot of the older plants or plants near borders where, you might go by on a vehicle or kids are playing, a lot of it'll break off, leading to how much of us will see them depicted here, where you just have broken off little scarrings going up and down the stems throughout. And of course, there is another native lookalike because it couldn't just be easy. So the native eastern wahoo, when both plants have lost their leaves, can be confused with the way their fruit grows. However, if you note on the left, the capsule around the fruit for the native eastern wahoo is a pinkish red, much more in line with the fruit itself. Versus on the right, we can see the very dark purplish capsule along the winged euonymus's fruit. When they're in full leaf, it's a lot easier to tell them apart, as well as when the wings are still on the euonymus. Next plant here is winter honeysuckle. There are unfortunately 4 invasive honeysuckles, only 2 of which we're covering today. The other 2 are Morrow's honeysuckle and Tartarian. But back to the winter honeysuckle, much like the amber covered earlier by Natalie, this one does as well have these opposite leaves, indicative of a honeysuckle. As also as well in fruit right now, those sugary sweet fruits I'm sure we're all quite familiar with at this point, unfortunately. One of the big key differentiations between winter honeysuckle and all the rest is amber honeysuckle, as mentioned and depicted earlier, has those vertical stripes and splitting along the bark. Winter honeysuckle will have that as well while it's younger and thin, but as it matures and grows, those slits will actually end up splitting into a shreddy, kind of papery bark that'll hang off and is one of the best indicators uh, by sight that this is a separate plant. And we'll move on to our next habit, those of trees. And here depicted is a Chinaberry tree. Now, this tree is a bit more common towards DC capital as well as Richmond. So some of us are more towards the Shenandoah area, might not have seen these yet. However, they have quite depicted here. You see those yellow tinges are actually the fruit that give it its namesake. It is another, unfortunately, prolific cedar. Now, if you do manage to catch it with its foliage, like this young sapling right here, it does also have a very unique compound leaf. They will elongate and darken, as this is just a sapling, but it's quite a unique shape, so it's good to point that out. If we skip over here to the next slide, are the namesake of the plant, these yellow to orange fruits. They're approximately the size of an acorn and will dry as the season goes on, and you'll see here that they will absolutely occupy the canopy of the tree and they'll shrivel to almost a nut-like look to them, but they will have lost all their leaves and will not fall to the ground like a lot of our native nuts will. Now, this plant also, these berries are toxic to a number of animals as well as humans when they fall. Unfortunately, we've noticed all the leaves falling off this tree. This tree is a bit allelopathic, meaning it puts off a chemical into the soil, from its leaf fall that'll actually start to kill off a lot of the plants around it. So you see a bit of a clearing and then nothing would just this tree covered in these namesake seeds. So we can easily imagine how this one becomes a problem relatively quick. We'll move on to our next habit, the vines. So our first vine here, unfortunately, very well known by a lot of people, is the Oriental or Asiatic bittersweet, also often called roundleaf bittersweet. As we'll see here in the next slide, this vine has a very generic, basic round shape to all of its leaves. Some of its leaves may have a bit of a tapered point, a bit like a spade. However, all the leaves, the base of which is that round shape. So we see depicted here in the center point, we have that long tapered point, and the one right below it, it doesn't really have much of that. But as we see here, it is in fruit, and they're very dramatic. I liken it to kind of like an inverted Baby Bell cheese with a waxy yellow-orange outside, but a very bright red interior. There is a Native American bittersweet as well, with a very similar colored fruit. However, if you look closely in the hand, all those fruit are clustered at the very end of the branch, and one in the top right corner, you can see a little bit as well, though it's slightly out of focus, versus on the right, the invasive bittersweet, those fruit are clustered all up and down the stem wherever they can kind of fit. And that is one of the best ways to tell them apart right now, particularly. So we went on a bit about the foliage and the fruit. Another great telltale is this twisting habit with this kind of snake and mid-shed style bark. None of our native vines twist to this extent, which I'll go into a little bit the next couple slides. As we see here, this is just a spot where the bittersweet is absolutely just taken over, and it's mostly twisting on itself. And you can see off on the left, there's a braid where you can barely see the gap in between them. And then whatever poor plant was the original core for that spiral in the center. And then it's just it's really aggressive twisting, almost constricting habit, much like a boa constrictor, as we see in this next image, is actually how it threatens a lot of our native trees. These vines can get quite big, up to the size of people's calves, and put just an exuberant amount of pressure on our native trees, ending up killing them in the long run. That one approximately is probably close to 3 or 4 inches in diameter. You can just see the it wrapping around that tree. Here we have our last find, that being porcelain berry, and you can see it absolutely smothering this edge of trees and bushes. That was probably a trail at one point. Now, if in case you haven't been able to figure out, porcelain berry unfortunately is a bit of a lookalike for our native grapes. However, I did want to point out here the easiest way to tell it apart. This is where it's transitioning between flower and fruit, and note that they are kind of thrust up above the leaves. As we all know, our grapes, they like to drape, so they tend to throw their flowers and fruit below the leaves, hanging beneath. And here's another bit of focus on those fruit. Hence the name. These look like very tone of paints you would see on old porcelain pottery, going from blues and chalky whites to purples and pinks. And here's a better comparison between our native wild grapes as well as the porcelain berry. On the left, you see that dangling cluster beneath the leaves, versus on the right, you see the smattering held up above the leaves. Of course, on the left is those familiar grape colors of greens to purples, and then the very candy-like colors in the porcelain berry on the right. Other than that, thank you so much for your time. Does anyone have any questions?
So right now, I actually don't see any questions. Saw that one person, asked for the link for tomorrow, um, which Lauren provided. But did you get any questions from in
I
the
think
chat?
one just
Oh,
came in.
let me see. One just came in.
They asked what's the botanical name for native eastern wahoo. I can look that up.
And Dan Nelson asked if we could present to the PWC board. If you're interested, if you wouldn't mind forwarding that to Rowena at Blue Ridge Prism, and we can start setting that up at some other time.
Great. All right, I am going to find you all actually sent us some questions that when you were signing up. Oh my goodness, 9 came in at once.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
So Catherine Cooper has a question. Is the native oriental bittersweet also called Hearts of Buston? No, that is a different plant. The American bittersweet is also a vine. The Hearts of Buston is also called strawberry shrub, or oh, I just drew a blank on that, but different plant. I'll put the answer in the chat.
So one person asked if the Chinese privet doesn't have berries, does that mean it's not spreading?
Could you repeat that again one more time, please?
If a Chinese privet does not have berries, is it not spreading? Does it mean it's male and it can't spread? Or can it still spread even if it doesn't have berries?
So it does primarily spread through berries, but a good question is, are you absolutely positive you've seen the whole plant and its berries? And it could be a matter of timing. Unfortunately, either hasn't formed into berries yet, or the birds just beat you to it and have already started spreading it. But that is a good question. Its primary form spread is the berries, though. But
And
without being able to really take a look at it, I couldn't tell you.
it can also spread by root sprouts as well.
Root sprouts. Okay. And we got a question when everyone was registering, and we had some people type in questions beforehand. And one of them was, can you all help us in figuring out which invasive plants tend to be evergreen or near evergreen in this part of the world or even south of here? Are there plants that just stay green throughout the year?
I would say privets.
Privet? Anything else?
We
English
have
ivy, winter creeper, leatherleaf mahonia.
So we saved most of the evergreen ones for our upcoming winter ID, which will be the first week of December.
Yeah, Chris Jackson asked, isn't leatherleaf mahonia also considered invasive? Yes, leatherleaf is on the Virginia DCR invasive list.
And there are a number of invasive plants which are semi-evergreen. So some right next to each other will retain their leaves while others don't. And those have been saved for the winter workshop as well.
A practical question. Tina asked, what's the name of the app where we should take a photo of these invasives? Which ones would you guys recommend?
I use Picture This and Seek the most.
Okay.
And I have them downloaded on my iPhone.
Okay. So can you go ahead and share the links to those in the chat so everyone can see which ones you like to use, Natalie? Another question we got is, how do you identify invasive plants in the fall and winter if there aren't any leaves? I mean, you pretty much touched on this because you looked at the bark and stuff and different things, but let's say these plants are not evergreen and they don't have any leaves, and when, maybe everyone just has like plant blindness and they're walking through in the fall and winter and they just see all these brown, branches. What are some good ways that you recommend that they look at things?
Two that really stand out for me are Tree of Heaven, especially if it's a female, because those clumps of winged seeds, those will stay on the tree well into like late winter, springtime. And then another one is Royal Polonia. So if it doesn't have leaves on it, I see a lot of times that it retains those. They look like Pac-Man to me. They're clumps of leftover seeds that are open. So those are two that I find pretty easy to ID in the winter, tree-wise.
So yeah, I'd really say it depends on the plant because we have some annual plants where particularly lesser celandine, it doesn't even last the full of spring. So it can be entirely gone by the time it comes up the winter. And then some plants, which of course are evergreen, are easy to see or have some trait you can still see throughout the year, like the rather unique bark and seeds of the tree of heaven. I liken it to a bit like cantaloupe bark. Cantaloupe skin is pretty unique to the site once you really get a good look for it. It's very hard to unsee. Wineberry in particular is another easy one, even though it loses all its leaves. It looks a lot like a bunch of rusty rebar kind of through the bottom 2, 3 feet of the woods up to 4 feet at times, just arcing through there, little canes. So it's pretty easy to pick out, but it does really depend on what plant.
So a couple people wanted, I guess it's a hard word to say, allelopathic. Can you explain again what that means?
Yeah, so tree of heaven is allelopathic, amber honeysuckle is allelopathic, garlic mustard is allelopathic. So what that means is it's basically those plants are releasing chemicals from their roots, and those chemicals are preventing other plants from growing nearby.
Right, and is like something like autumn olive, is that allelopathic as well?
Um,
I think it might be,
I'm
right?
not sure about autumn olive. I know amber honeysuckle is.
One thing I noticed when Jacob was talking about wing euonymus is people here, you might know that plant better as burning bush. And that's the one with the really beautiful red leaves. And Jacob talked about the euonymus with the little red the red fruits on there. But I know that a lot of people probably use the term burning bush just in case you were confused and you saw that and you were like, oh, I wonder if it's the same thing that I'm seeing. And and related to that is someone asked if Japanese honeysuckle, you talked about Japanese honeysuckle, didn't you, Jacob?
I mentioned it in passing. What
You
was the
mentioned it
question
in
about it?
passing. We talk about it more in the spring, I think, when it's starting to grow.
Yeah, we tried to separate these out when there's better identification or when it's one of the only things identifiable. When Japanese honeysuckle's in full leaf and flower and kind of smothering things, it's a lot easier to pick out than say right about now.
Right, right. Um, so I've let our panelists take a look at all these questions. Do you have anything for me, Lauren, that you can ask our panelists?
We have one question that came in. What are some herbs to watch out for? This time of year, most of the herbs are dying back, losing their leaves, going back underground. However, one of the winter herbs that has started to pop up again is chickweed or Stellaria medea. And chickweed will actually pop up as early as February, for example, by roadsides, but we are seeing a little bit now. It's very, very easy to hand pull, has a rosette structure. But what we tried to do for these sessions is divide all 103 plants up by the 4 seasons and focus on what are the ones that you're most likely to see right now and want to get out there and treat.
So for the first time, and we've been doing these webinars for a while, we've gotten some really interesting questions from people about resources that they want to know, some great resources about mistaking identity. It's some of the slides that Jacob and Natalie put side by side photos of a native plant next to an invasive plant. And are there resources or books that you can refer them to where they can see more information about that? I myself know that the New York Botanical Gardens has a great, I don't have it right now, maybe somebody can pull it up, has a great, I don't know if it's a book, but it's a publication or website that does have mistaken identity side by side with native plants and invasive plants. And we also got another question from Catherine about, she lives in the Southeast and uses iNaturalist and Bonet maps frequently. And are there other ID books that you all would recommend for identifying natives in the southeastern part of the United States. I would probably recommend the one that I probably look at the most are probably a lot of the resources from the Virginia Native Plant Society. If you go to their website, they have really wonderful resources for all native plants, really. And they've got a lot of up close and personal images of native plants so you can identify them and just really have a lot of resources. So if for Virginia, I would go to the Virginia Native Plant Society website.
The Plant Invaders of the Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas Guidebook, there's also native alternatives in the back, but it's for the Mid-Atlantic. I put the link in the chat.
Right. And can you just go ahead and also put in, Natalie, the digital atlas, the Virginia flora? For my job, one of the things that I do every week when I do Weed It Wednesdays, I always refer the digital atlas. But one thing, you know, that people should know, the digital atlas also has all the native plants as well. So if you just put in digital atlas of Virginia flora in your search bar and you know, type in a native plant or whatever, you can pull up all this information about it, and then they also include photos. So that's another really great resource. Okay, do we have any more questions?
We also got a number of questions regarding herbicide in the pre-submitted questions. And at the moment, the best general information we have about specific herbicide recommendations and dilution rates is the Department of Forestry chart. What I will caveat that by saying, and I just put the link in the chat to that chart, is that we're in the process of updating that chart and updating recommendations. So next year you will see a revised version that we hope is a little bit easier to help with. But we're also planning a session on demystifying herbicides for next year. So a lot more information to come about that. But right now in the chat is the best available general resource that we have available.
Great. So stay tuned. We will be coming with a really great, hopefully great webinar on herbicides, and we'll answer many of your questions there. That is in production. So stay tuned, and that will be coming up in the next year or next several months. And we're really looking forward to that, presenting new research that we've been doing, but also answer all of your questions about the best types of herbicides to use and kind of use layman's terms on how to mix them and what to buy so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. Okay, Jacob, could you stop sharing your screen?
Rowena, did we catch, there was one other question that came in about distinguishing grape from porcelain berry when there are no leaves?
You know what? That's a good question. Can you go ahead and ask that, Lauren?
Course. So the question came in, how do you best way to distinguish native grape from porcelain berry if no fruit is present? And so that is to cut into a relatively thick stem, and the pith of porcelain berry, this very center of the vine, will be a bright white, and our native grapes will have a brown dot in the cross section of the vine.
Good question. I personally get a lot of questions from people about native grape, and I was just taking a walk with someone the other day who thought native grapevine was an invasive plant, and it's not. It's a native plant that provides a lot of great resources to the animals, but I can see how it can be confusing because it does wind up there in the trees. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to just look at my panel one more time and ask you, are there any more questions from the audience? Nope. Okay, then we're going to move on, hopefully get you guys out of here early. We are really grateful that you guys joined us today. This was a free webinar. We are really happy to be able to provide them, but it wasn't free to produce. And so if you are so inclined, we would welcome any sort of support that you can give Blue Ridge PRISM. We're so grateful for you guys, for your support as an audience, and just in general. And if you feel so inclined to support our work so we can continue to provide these free webinars to the public, please go visit us at blueridgeprism.org/donate, and any sort of donation is welcome, and we're really grateful for that. If you'd like to learn more about Blue Ridge Prism, feel free to go to our website at blueridgeprism.org. And once again, if you have any questions for us, or we didn't get to something and missed your question, go ahead and email us at info@blueridgeprism.org. You can follow us on our different social media channels, including Facebook and Instagram. And we're always looking for volunteers to help us with different tasks. And again, you can email us at info@blueridgeprism.org if you'd like to talk with me a little bit more on how to get involved. Just as a reminder, the recording of this email will be emailed to you in a few days, along with some additional resources for your use. So just sit tight, and you can have this recording at your fingertips if you've got any questions and want to take another look at some of the slides that Natalie and Jacob shared with you. Okay, well, if that's it, this is rare. We are going to be able to let you go early. Thank you so much for joining us. A short survey is going to pop up after you get out of this webinar, asking you to share your thoughts on subjects that we can talk about in the future, like herbicides. And it'll just take a few minutes. So if you can fill that out, we just want to know that we are meeting your needs and would like to be able to serve you better. So please fill that out. And again, we're grateful to you. We're grateful to the Virginia Environmental Endowment for their help in funding our outreach efforts to the public. And other than that, that's it. Thanks so much. And